so easy to forget to do that. So here's the article. And so the article is called, actually I have two articles that we're going to take a look at in the course of this discussion. And the first, they're both actually from Torah.com. Do not hate, rebuke without sin. And the commandment that we're looking at is in the book of Leviticus, in the so-called holiness code in Leviticus. And it reads, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely reproach your neighbor, and you shall bear no sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people. You shall love your fellow as yourself. I am Adonai. And of course, the most famous part of this section is you shall love your fellow or your neighbor. The word is reyacha, and it certainly could mean neighbor or fellow. But it's very interesting. The word surely is interesting because in Hebrew it's a grammatical form called the infinitive absolute, or it's an infinitive of emphasis. And then there's a lot of discussion which we are up to our eyeballs in this one sentence. You shall surely reproach your neighbor, and you shall bear no sin because of him. So the question is, what is the meaning of that? And there's a whole range of discussions. One possibility is reproach your neighbor who is presumably sinning or doing something wrong. And if you don't reproach your neighbor, then your neighbor is going to continue to do that wrong thing, and you are somehow culpable because you haven't taken the action of preventing him from doing it. Or it might also mean that it's just simply a sin not to reproach him. And also another discussion, and it was definitely in the material we read last time, it says, surely reproach your neighbor, because if you don't, then you may just seethe with anger and not, somebody does something wrong and you don't say anything, and you're just, angry at this person, and that might cause you to take action. And they talked about, two of David's sons. David's daughter is raped by her stepbrother, and her full brother doesn't say anything to his half brother about having done this, and then winds up killing him. So I think it's Maimonides or someone says that was because he did not reproach him. Alan.
And I look at this rebuke as also related to kind of improving the quality of the society and doing my part to leave the world better than the way it was before I came.
Yes.
Like Tikkun Olam almost even.
Yes. So it is a tikkun. A tikkun is a repair. So when someone does something wrong, the underlying idea is that there's an obligation to repair it. And I think the part of the text that we're going to read tonight is going to raise the question of how far do you go to reprove or redress your neighbor and address him or her. So, but to me, this is one example of this. One of the reasons why I'm actually so fond of this stuff is because it illustrates how much meaning and variability there can be in the commandments. And remember, the underlying assumption, this is sort of stepping way back, the underlying assumption is that these are commandments from God. This is God speaking to us. And everything that God says to us is infinitely deep and broad in meaning. It's not so simple. God is not simple. That is the understanding. So what the rabbis are going to do over hundreds and thousands of years, right up until this day, and we're doing it right now, is digging into this text to try and understand what is God really telling us. Yeah, Erwin.
Last week Torah portion was that they divided the land amongst the tribes,
Hmm.
and the two women said that because their father didn't have a son, they shouldn't be punished and they should get a part of the land.
The other says,
And Moses said to them that, listen, I cannot answer you that what is the, because the Torah said that it's only men who getting only the sons. And Moses talked to God, and God said to him, yes, give a portion to the women also. So God corrected himself in the Torah.
No, what I would say is God clarified it because there's a
Corrected
rule.
it,
Hold on. Let me respond. First of all, as Henry signaled, it was five daughters. It's the five daughters of Zelophehad,
okay.
and there is a rule in the Torah, but the rule in the Torah doesn't clearly address the question of what happens if somebody leaves no sons. Does it go
Yeah.
to more distant relatives or does it go to daughters? That is is not clear in the Torah. So, and my recollection of that is that Moses says exactly what you said. I'm not sure. I got to consult the boss. And Moses consults God, and God says, yes, the daughters have merit. Their claim has merit. And in rabbinic authority, they get a lot of credit because they helped clarify the Torah.
So, Mike, the reason I'm bringing up this question because these 1613 commandment was written thousands of years ago. So maybe some of them doesn't apply today, and God can correct it and make it that it would be applying today.
So what I would say is we had a whole session on, well, we had a whole session on is the Torah deliberately flawed?
Yes,
And
correct.
so that was the thesis, and that was written by an Orthodox rabbi and scholar. And he said the Torah was written at a time and in a way that it would be understood by the people. So as a simple example, uh, God doesn't really need to be served breakfast, lunch, and dinner. God doesn't need animal sacrifices. But if in the Torah, 3,200 years ago, God said, the way I want to be worshiped is not with sacrifices, that would be as crazy as someone coming down today saying, the way we should worship our God is to wear tinfoil hats and wait for UFOs. It would be a completely absurd way of worshiping God. The idea, by the way, of an invisible God is absurd and crazy enough. There had never been an invisible God before. And the Romans actually accused the Jews of being atheists because they worshiped an invisible God. So what the thesis of that article is that the Torah is written so it could be understood by the people to whom it was given. Whether you take the traditional approach 3,200 years ago, or a more scholarly approach would be about 2,500 years ago. But times change, so the Torah is going to change with the times. And that's the job of the rabbis, and our job would be to continue to interpret the Torah in light of the times to determine what are really the important principles here and what should we, how should we change things? And, another classic example that came up in that article was the concept of an eye for an eye. The rabbis were very uncomfortable with the idea of people knocking out other people's eyes. So they proved that God didn't mean it. Although it was very clear, it's repeated 3 times in the Torah. Somebody knocks out your eye, you knock out their eye. So that's the job of the rabbis. The rabbis are taking the Torah very seriously, but they are not necessarily taking it literally. Ken and Patricia.
most of what we've been talking about is reproaching after the fact. Could this apply to if you get information that someone is going to do something that is sinful, is it okay to reproach them, or if the information is wrong, are you going to be in trouble?
Um, I would say generally it's okay to reproach them. Well, I'll give you a specific example. Um, when I lived in Israel, I wore my yarmulke all the time. Not all restaurants in Israel are kosher. So if I went into a non-kosher restaurant in Israel with my yarmulke on, without fail, people would come up to me and say, "Do you realize this is not a kosher restaurant?" Because they would presume that the fact that I'm wearing a yarmulke means that I'm Orthodox. So they were, very gently reproaching me so I wouldn't sin by eating non-kosher food. At the opposite extreme, there's a principle where if you know someone is getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning to murder people, you get up at 7 o'clock to kill them before they murder. I mean, you can't get much more serious and reproaching than that. So preemptive wars, preemptive strikes are kosher. And that
Okay.
certainly happened in the Six-Day War. Israel had information that every Arab country was massing to attack them, and they attacked and basically wiped out all the air forces of Egypt and other surrounding countries before they could strike. And you certainly could argue, what they did in Iran to wipe out nuclear capabilities or to attack nuclear capabilities is an example of that as well. So I would say yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. But if you did reproach them on information you got and the information was wrong, have you then sinned by reproaching them when
Well,
they weren't
you
going to do anything?
presumably, let's say, yeah, you say you're sorry. I mean, I don't know what. I mean, yeah, you can argue that you depending on how you did it, you may have insulted someone or humiliated someone, and if it turns out you did that incorrectly, you would apologize. Um, I don't have anything deeper than that. Okay, Joanne, are you up to reading tonight?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
So we're now up to the another interpretation. Let's see. I might even be able to find the other ones. Let's see. So there was a discussion, rebuke so the victim won't incur guilt. So you rebuke the person, I think sort of what you're talking about, Ken, so that the person won't sin and incur guilt. Another discussion is number 2, rebuke so that the rebuker won't incur guilt. There, the underlying assumption is if I am aware that someone is about to sin and I don't do anything, I somehow bear maybe not the same sin, but some measure of sin. And then the third item we're discussing is this question, rebuke but don't shame, so that the rebuker will not incur guilt. So the same idea, you don't want your friend to incur guilt, but you don't want to commit the sin of shaming someone. So let's see what the proper way to rebuke is. Joanne?
Rebuke but don't shame, so that the rebuker will not incur guilt. In the third exegetical tradition reflected in the NJPS translation, the velo is disjunctive, placing a limit on how one should reproach another. NJPS, you shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him.
So
It doesn't.
Yeah. Why don't you finish one more sentence? Yes.
All right. It thus implies that the act of rebuking itself might incur guilt.
So I mean, just reflecting on a couple of interesting things. One is JPS is the New Jewish Publication Society translation. So it is a Jewish translation. There's like the old JPS, which the date is like 1913, and it uses kind of a lot of old English language. It's actually a pretty literal translation. And the new JPS, which you'll find in Plout and other sort of modern copies of the Bible, Jewish copies of the Bible, is this one. And then what's going on here is, what does the velo mean? And the velo can mean many things. It can mean, here they're translating it as but. It can mean and. It's a conjunction, and it can have different meanings. So let's take a look at how we should rebuke.
The sages in the Tanakh Midrash on Leviticus Sifra debate how one should effectively go about rebuking another person so that one not incur guilt. The first part of the Midrash focuses on not harboring hatred in the heart, rather than on externalized expressions of hatred that might entail violence.
Okay, so just explaining this word, this Tanaitic Midrash, the Tanaim are basically before the year 200. Those are the authors of the Mishnah and people and the rabbis writing in that period. And then the later rabbis are called the Amoraim, the later rabbis in the Talmud. Erwin.
Rabbi, if I feel I commit a sin and I feel guilty, can I rebuke myself when I pray to God?
Yeah, so I would say confessing your sin to God is, you could argue that that's a form of rebuke. I would not disagree with that. I don't think it necessarily is what is meant in this passage of the Torah. So let's see what Sifra says. Sifra is a midrash, but it's very early, 3rd century, which is, in the year 200s of the Common Era. Okay, you shall not hate.
Hey, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. One might think that you should not strike him, curse him, slap him. The Torah therefore says, in your heart, I only said hatred, which is in the heart. One should continue to rebuke, even 4 or 5 times, based on the doubling of the verb.
So the verb is, you shall surely rebuke, hocheach tocheach. So the fact that the verb is used twice, they're saying you should rebuke multiple times. So let's see what he says in the English.
Sifra, and whence do we know that if you have reproached him even 4 or 5 times, and it has not worked, go back and reproach him further? From the doubling of the verb, you shall surely reproach, hochiach tochiach. This might also imply that one should verbalize rebuke, but not to the point of causing a fight, resulting in curses and blows. A debate in the Talmud explores until what point one should rebuke another.
So this is Babylonian Talmud. It's Arachim. The B is for Babylonian Talmud. That's the tractate and page 16b.
Until what point should a person persist in rebuking his neighbor? Rav said until the rebuke is met by hitting. Shmuel said until cursing, and Rabbi Yochanan said to the point of anger. Nezifa al reprimand ban. This is like a dispute between Tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer said until the rebuke is met by hitting. Rabbi Yehoshua said until cursing. Ben Azay said until anger for reprimand.
Okay, and I think what they're saying here is, you rebuke and rebuke and rebuke until the person you're rebuking hits you. That's, I think, what this is saying. But it's a Talmudic argument. I don't know where the argument ends. Alan, you're muted, Alan.
This point you just made now adds to my question in a confusing way. When you recognize something that's deserving of rebuking somebody, the Bible is obligating you to do it, and the person you're trying to get him or her to correct their behavior or somehow accept that they were wrong, you don't just get to do it. You keep doing it unless you get punished by the other person.
Unless you bring the person, what this is saying as I read it, Actually, let's read the last sentence. Joanne, why don't you read this
In
sentence?
each case, the sin would not fall upon the wrongdoer who is rebuked, but on the rebuker for going too far.
So if the rebuker goes to the point where he or she arouses physical violence, that's going too far. Alan, you are the witness. Women of the wall. Okay. So you have ultra Orthodox and ultra Orthodox people rebuking. I would say, if you ask them, they would say, according to Leviticus, this is our obligation. It's one of the 613.
Right.
And now the question is, how far do they go?
Well, they spit and they yell and they shout to interfere with the service. They do all those things, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and they don't
So,
succeed because we and the men and the women at the wall. This is a great example. Let's keep going here a little bit. So they never stop. Okay, they only stop short of violence because the reform movement, conservative movement, finally got some prohibition of physical violence. But short of that, they do everything they can do to rebuke us for allowing women to pray and sing in public.
yes, and carry a Torah scroll. And
Right.
and I think there were times, I think it's not happening so much now, where people would physically grab the Torah scroll, people would attack women of the wall, and sometimes the women of the wall would be arrested. I remember once reading there was a time in which if a woman was at the wall wearing a talit and a man raped her, it was just as likely that she would be arrested as he would be arrested.
That I didn't know, but I do know that the women have many full Torahs, small Torahs like
Right.
we give to kids sometimes, but they're
Mhm.
sure in the way I'm describing them, and they sneak them in. And if the security people, because there's no metal in them, if they don't get caught, then they actually read from a kosher service.
Right.
They've been interfered with as much as possible. Okay, so this is rebuke as seen in the eyes of the person who is doing the rebuking. This is a question of what's absolute, right? So I don't think I shouldn't be rebuked for supporting the women of the wall, and they think I shouldn't be. We have a difference of opinion on what's rebukable.
So I would say the underlying difference of opinion is whether the women are committing sins.
And of course, as a Reformed Jew, they're not. And
So but that's the
no,
difference of opinion. If let me try and stretch your reform sensibilities. If a group came to the wall and started slaughtering pigs at the Western Wall, do you think they should be rebuked and stopped?
Yes.
Yes.
yeah. I mean, I have to say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or even let's be less fanciful. Certainly on the men's side of the wall, you are obligated to cover your head.
Yes.
And if you're not wearing a yarmulke or a kippah, they have cardboard ones that they will be happy to lend you.
They have real ones too.
The real ones too, yeah. So the question then is, if someone refuses to cover their head
Yes.
at the Western Wall, is that something that person should be rebuked for? That's actually a much more realistic question.
Yeah, go back to the sin part. So the way in which let's say Orthodoxy or the ultra Orthodoxy interpreted something, because where in the Bible does it say
Yeah,
that
we're not going to get to the Bible because we're the religion of the Talmud, and it's not even in the Talmud, but it's clearly a minchag in Orthodox and conservative synagogues. Jews and non-Jews alike should cover their head.
cover
That-
head, yes, but the praying in public
No, I'm not talking about praying in public. I'm not talking about that.
But
So what I'm really saying
yeah.
is the issue that you're describing is not, I don't think, is whether it's appropriate to rebuke. It's a question of what is a sin. So, I would say that if you're in a synagogue, the people that control the synagogue can control standards of behavior in the synagogue. One of, assuming that they're reasonable, one of which is you cover your head. And if someone refuses to cover their head, I think you can, ask that person to leave
That's
more
right.
and more forcefully.
I get that, and the controversy in the Kotel is the Haredi.
Yeah, the question of Kotel.
Who controls the synagogue? The
Yes,
Kotel.
the question of the Kotel, the Western Wall, is it an Orthodox synagogue? So that's a separate question. But I would say, as a Reform rabbi, I would, I think this obligation to rebuke is reasonable. The question is, what is sin? I don't think women praying or reading from a Torah is sinful. Erwin.
Exactly. No, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Praying to God is not a sin. And no matter where are you praying, and in an Orthodox synagogue, the women are allowed to pray. They are just separated.
Right.
So I've been at the hotel many times, and there is a place is separated where they
Right.
can pray.
Right. The issue is, are they allowed to read from Torah? Are
they
they
allowed
allowed to wear
are they allowed-
talit and tefillin?
Are they allowed to sing?
Rabbi Dubois took my granddaughter several years ago to Israel with other young women, and they went to the hotel and they prayed there. And my granddaughter said that she was afraid.
Yeah. So that's I understand that. My daughter on a family trip went to the Kotel, and she had her talit, and she's tiny. I mean, if you saw her, she would look like she's 9 or 10. And she brought her talit, and she was praying at the Western Wall with her talit on, and the ladies at the wall started criticizing her, and she said very proudly, "I'm Reform, and we wear our talit," and they left her alone. But and this was way before Women of the Wall. Anyway.
She must have been 9 then, because that's been going on for over 30 years. Okay, just to make my point.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
What do you mean? Your point that she was before the Women of the Wall is probably not actually.
Yeah, as a recognized organization. So the issue is really more what is sin and what's a proper way to pray. I'm doing what rabbis do, and that is nitpick, Erwin. You said anybody should be able to pray to God in a synagogue, right?
Yeah.
Would you allow a group of Christians to carry a cross in and pray prayers from the New Testament in a synagogue?
I don't think so.
Okay, so they're praying to the same God, different form, but anyway. Each religion has the ability to set its boundaries and customs, but anyway, this idea of reproaching is something very real, and at least once a month.
Rabbi, on the other hand, I went to a Christian wedding and in a church here in Thousand Oaks, and I was welcomed. Nobody troubled me. And I think a lot of times bar mitzvahs have Christian guests.
And there's no problem with that.
No problem, no.
Right. I think it's not necessarily true on the opposite side that, well, there was once a case. This is really interesting one. It's an obscure issue in Catholic law. To have a Catholic wedding has to take place in a house of God, which normally is a church or a church courtyard or whatever. But it can also be in the synagogue. And I actually had a case where I was going to do a wedding with a priest. I was going to co-officiate. And they actually asked permission and we got permission to conduct this wedding in the sanctuary at Temple Adat Elohim. And it never happened because the couple split up before the wedding. But we actually got permission from I don't remember even who was the rabbi at the time. But it's
Rabbi,
yes.
when I was a member of Etz many times high holiday services split up and we celebrated next door in a church.
Yes. Yeah, I would say by and large, churches are far more open to Jewish celebrations inside of them than synagogues are open to Christian celebrations inside of them. It's not symmetric for reasons which are, should be pretty clear.
Why would a Gentile man come to a Friday evening Shabbat service as a guest and put a yarmulke on?
Why would he?
Why would he?
Because if it were a conservative or Orthodox synagogue, he would be asked to put a yarmulke on.
Right.
Why?
Why? Because it's the custom of the place. Just like in many churches, women are not supposed to have exposed shoulders,
Right.
Depending on where you are and so on. It's the minchag, it's the custom of the place that men should cover their heads in a synagogue when they are in a synagogue.
Yeah, but Rabbi, it's very interesting when you go to a Catholic church, when you enter, you're not supposed to have your head covered,
right?
But the priest wears a yarmulke.
I would say it is not.
It's a skull cap.
It's not common that priests cover. Actually, I'll ask Jim. I don't think normally priests cover their head during services, do they?
You're correct. They do not. Bishops do.
Bishops do.
Yeah, but not
Bishop
priests.
is a priest.
A bishop is a priest, but not every priest is a bishop. So it's a sign of their office. So basically, it's the custom of the place. And I've been in churches many, 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 many times, and no one has ever asked me to take off my yarmulke because they understand that it's a religious custom. So
okay, but I'm not a rabbi. And if I was to go to a church,
right,
on a Sunday or for some ceremony or whatever, would I put a yarmulke on?
No.
Well, so hold on a second. So the question is, do you normally wear a yarmulke? I would say if you normally wear a yarmulke, then you should not take it off to go inside a church.
No. But when I go to a synagogue,
right,
to the best of my knowledge, I have always worn a yarmulke.
So it's entirely up to you. The question that I was addressing is, would the authorities in the church ask you to remove the yarmulke? And I would say most Christians understand that Jews wear these hats. And, if you were wearing a fedora or a baseball cap, I would say that they might ask you to remove it. But if you were wearing a yarmulke, I would be very surprised if they would ask you to remove it. Look, I attended a mass for Pope Francis, and I was sitting with a few other rabbis, and we were all wearing yarmulkes. And this was at the cathedral in Los Angeles. Certainly no one asked us to remove our yarmulkes. And basically, when I am in my role as a rabbi, I always wear a yarmulke. I don't wear it all the time.
Because you are a rabbi.
No, that's my practice. That is my practice. It has nothing to do with being a rabbi.
I have seen men come into a synagogue wearing a hat.
Right.
A baseball hat.
Right.
Fedora.
Right.
What have you. And they wear that during the service.
Yes, because the obligation is to cover your head. It doesn't have to be with this particular kind of cloth. You can cover your head with anything. That's the rule. Alan.
Two things. I'm remembering that at my father's funeral, one of my best friends in high school, who's Catholic, wore a yarmulke. And I think what Larry was doing was being respectful to the practice in the funeral parlor. It wasn't a synagogue, but It
Yes.
was the he was sensitive to that. So
Right.
a non-Jew can be just as sensitive to the
Yeah,
environment and vice versa.
I would say it's a sign of respect,
Yeah.
which which Judaism has no problem with. And
Now
every time I conduct a wedding, I always bring a basket of yarmulkes. Even though the practice of the wedding may not be to insist that men wear yarmulkes, I always have them available in case someone wants to wear them.
my other question has to do with sin. So this
Yeah.
subject of sin creates the motivation to rebuke the other party when, in the opinion or the facts or whatever basis is that they believe there's sin in place, and now we you use the woman of the wall. One side thinks there's a sin, and the other side doesn't. What other than the arguments and all the mistreatment of each other, what's the right answer if both people believe?
So the I mean, this may not be an answer that you're comfortable with, but if you believe someone is sinning, you have an obligation to step in and try and prevent that from happening.
Okay.
So if you're an Orthodox Jew and you see women wearing tefillin or wearing a talit, and you believe that's a sin, you have an obligation to do that. In a civil society, ultimately the government is going to dictate how far you can go. Let me even raise, at the risk of
Before you do that, you stated it on the side of the perception of the sin is seen by the Orthodox, but in
so
terms
the
of
question is, the
reacting,
person rebuking,
yeah.
obviously, that's the person that has to decide whether I rebuke or not.
But if the person refuses because doesn't feel has been sinned, I guess that's where I was trying to understand that.
So, no, it's not an easy question. So again, I would say if someone is bringing a ham sandwich into your synagogue for an oneg, and that person doesn't think he's sinning and may not even be aware of kosher laws, right? But we're aware that that's not an appropriate thing to do. We have an obligation to step in and try and prevent that from happening.
Okay.
That's not controversial. Okay, now me and Jim are going to say something that is very controversial. Abortion. If you believe that abortion is murder, do you have an obligation to interfere with someone committing an abortion or a woman going into an abortion center to commit an abortion? Now, remember, I'm phrasing this deliberately. I'm saying if you believe someone is going to murder someone, do you have an obligation to prevent that from happening? I would say most of us would say yes. Now the question is, do you believe abortion is murder? We can disagree on that, and the government can decide, whether or not to make civil law about that question. But I've always understood that this is a difficult issue if you really believe abortion is murder. It's hard for me to say that people who are fighting abortion are wrong. It has to do with what you consider to be sin. So I've gone from the extremes, from a ham and cheese sandwich to praying at the wall to abortion. So I'm just recognizing that these are difficult problems. These are not easy, and there's an issue in our society that if one group has a strong religious feeling about an issue, is that irrelevant or do we consider it? And I think Thomas Jefferson said, it depends how widespread that feeling is. I would say most of us would consider murder to be wrong. But the idea of taking the life of another person being a sin is a religious idea. Okay, taking the life of a stem of broccoli is not a problem. Taking the life of a lamb is not a problem if you want to have lamb chops. Taking the life of a human being is a problem. But because virtually all religions agree on that, Jefferson said that where religions agree, we can enact Western law to codify religious beliefs into law. But where there is significant disagreement, Jefferson said we should not do that. But these are not easy issues. And the decision whether to rebuke is not necessarily an easy issue, which, for me, why it's so interesting to delve into it. And I really appreciate, you're raising these issues. Okay. It would be a shame if we don't read about the problem of shame. Joanne.
The Sifra also qualifies how one should rebuke another person. Do not rebuke him to the point of causing shame. Sifra, one might think even if he rebukes him and his countenance changes, that is, he is shamed. The Torah therefore says, and you shall bear no sin because of him.
So the issue here, it's a little, it's not necessarily clear that shaming someone is a sin. So if in your rebuking, you shame someone, you have gone too far. And I used that example when we first started discussing this of a friend of mine who, in his golf group, someone made a comment, that you shouldn't Jew him down. It was a insensitive comment, which certainly could be interpreted reasonably as anti-Semitic. And my friend spoke up in front of his friends and said, I'm a Jew and I find that insulting and I want you to apologize to me. So, he later asked me, did I think he did the right thing? And I said, I think you did the right thing in the wrong way because you publicly shamed this person. So that's, according to Sifra here, that's an issue. And also in that situation, the person is not going to apologize. Had you done it in private, you might have actually gotten your point across.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I think I told you that, or maybe you were there when I did that. I rebuked a person in Adat Elohim because he was at the high holiday service and he admitted that he was a skinhead. And then after, it was in public, and obviously I shamed him. But after realizing what I did, I apologized to the rabbi. So
you apologize to the rabbi or to the person?
No, to the rabbi.
Oh, okay.
I never would apologize to the skinhead.
Okay. So as I reflect on that, did the skinhead do something or just admit that he's a skinhead?
No, he was just at the service and I was very upset that he was invited to the high holiday service.
Okay. So what I would say is that if someone doesn't do something, Judaism focuses on what you do more than what you say or believe. So I would say, a person can be a Nazi, a person can be a skinhead, I presume is, ultra right, sort of neo-Nazi. And they could say, this is a group that I'm a member of, but I don't think necessarily that would merit public disapproval or shaming. If they brought a flag with a swastika in, or if they stood up and disrupted the service, that would be different. And I would say if you felt sorry for your action and you felt your action was wrong, the appropriate person to apologize to would be the person. You may want to apologize to the rabbi for causing a scene at the service. That would be appropriate also. Well, anyway, let's go on.
The sin is to cause shame by an insensitive, harsh, and perhaps public reproach of another person. In issuing criticism to the point of changing their countenance, you have undermined their very sense of self, penetrated their being to the point of blanching for reddening the skin of their face. Indeed, shaming another, according to the rabbinic sages, is tantamount to murder or bloodshed.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this earlier that when someone either turns red or turns white, It means you've interfered with their blood flow, and it's considered to be a very serious infraction. And I think I mentioned a case which I found was a beautiful way of someone reproaching me. I was conducting one of my first funerals before I became a rabbi, and I was so impressed with the ceremony of presenting and folding the flag that I forgot to say Kaddish. And one of the senior knowledgeable members of the congregation came up to me before the service was over and asked me a question. And he said, "Rabbi, should we be saying Kaddish?" And of course, he did that in the nicest way possible, where otherwise he could have said, he could have said, "Look, I know you're not really a rabbi, but even you should know we should say Kaddish." That would be a way of reproaching me and shaming me. But by asking whether it's proper or not, he was feigning ignorance on his part so that I could be the authority and be reminded. And of course, I admitted that I forgot. So that's a very gentle way of reproaching. Okay, so let's see what Rashi says.
Thus Rashi declares, but do not bear sin because of him. Do not expose him to shame. Make his face grow pale. Brene Brown, the American academic and popular sociologist, defined shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. In her formulation, shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is, I am bad. Guilt is, I did something bad. That is, shame is an unqualified negative emotion that undermines self-esteem. Yet, according to Jewish tradition, to have no sense of shame, in Hebrew, boshet panim, literally the capacity to be shamefaced, is to lack conscience, to have no moral compass. One who does not have boshet panim, humility or shame, but only azut panim, insolence, vulgarity, or shamelessness, is oblivious to the impact of his or her behavior on others. In short, a psychopath. To be capable of flushing or blanching in response to my own actions is to feel the dynamic process of self-reflection on one's skin, to keenly feel the boundaries between one's interior and exterior self, which would generate regret and perhaps ideally effect positive self-transformation. Perhaps a more nuanced distinction should be delineated between two emotions, a positive conscious arousing shame, more akin to guilt, and a negative one that engenders the annihilation of self. Moshe Halbertal offers us a definition of primary shame with finer distinctions. Improper exposure, contrary to a person's will, results in shame, and every moment of shame, even the slightest, is a profound wound to one's consciousness of boundedness, a sort of death blow. The possibility of experiencing shame is a self-protective emotion in its most basic form. In this sense, shame is to be differentiated from guilt. Guilt is expressed in the desire to clean a stain that sticks to a person and expresses the need to reinstate the self that has been sullied. Shame, by contrast, colors the entire self. Shame does not stain, but defiles the entire surface. It arouses the desire to disappear and be effaced because it results from an injury to the tissues that constitute the self and its boundaries. In Tokyo,
Yeah, let's read one more paragraph at least.
In Tokyo, the challenge then for educators and parents alike is to offer constructive criticism that encourages not shame, but guilt, the desire to take responsibility for one's actions and self-transformation. This is a great aspiration, so rarely achieved.
Jim,
The Sifra,
hold on. Jim.
okay.
Up above on the previous page, it said that shame is a self-protective emotion. Yeah,
Yeah, I noticed that too. I can't remember.
it was right down here. I'm pointing to the thing. You can't see.
Thank you.
The possibility of experiencing shame is a self-protective emotion. Yeah, it was there, and you went back.
Okay, I missed it.
There,
Yeah,
stop. Okay.
okay.
Yeah, at the top is a self-protective emotion in its in its most basic form. How
Okay.
is shame, Rabbi, a self-protective emotion?
Okay. So I would, it's fascinating to me how much effort this author devoted to this particular nuance. I talk about guilt a lot, and people will say they're guilty about something. A classic example is, I feel guilty that I had to put my mother in a nursing home. And what I always point out is that guilt is an appropriate reaction when you've done something wrong. So I would say, what have you done wrong in putting your mother in a nursing home? And they would typically say, it really isn't anything I've done wrong. So I would say what you're experiencing is really not guilt. It's regret and sadness that things have come to this. Guilt is when you've done something wrong, and I think it's a positive thing in that it alerts you so you can correct what you've done wrong and hopefully not do it again. I think this idea of shame is a barrier to doing something wrong for fear you will be shamed. So
Yeah.
when you go to the ballpark with someone you shouldn't be seen with in public,
Sure.
you're doing something wrong, and an appropriate reaction to that would be guilt. When 50 million people have seen that you've done something wrong, it's a bigger problem than just guilt. There is actually a word, I don't know if many of you are familiar with it. I think it's a word in English. It's from the German. It's called Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is taking pleasure in the misfortune of others, which certainly doesn't sound like a good thing, but boy, is it happening in that case of the of the kiss cam.
Yeah.
But, Rabbi,
Yes.
if a single woman gets pregnant, she cannot correct it because the baby will be born, but they make her feel shameful.
Yes, that I would say in certain traditions,
Yes, yes,
they
definitely.
would shame her.
Yes.
And
So
the only thing she can't, I mean,
she can correct the mistake.
well, there's a couple of possibilities here, and I'll go through them. One is she could get married before she gives birth. Namely, there's at least a 7 month period of time when she can be pretty sure that she is going to give birth. And so one possibility is to avoid the shame of giving birth out of wedlock, she could get married. Another thing she could do would be to put the baby up for adoption. Another thing she could do, which some of us would disagree with, is she could have an abortion. So there's all kinds of things that she could do to avoid that particular form of shame. But once the baby is born, the only thing I could say is that having experienced that shame, she could resolve not to do it again, namely to be careful not to have another baby out of wedlock. And I would say in our current culture, having a baby out of wedlock is not judged by society anywhere near as shameful as it was a generation or two ago. I mean, I would say it's not unusual at all for me to officiate at a wedding where a couple has had several children and then they decided to get married. It's not at all. And I'm also aware of people, in my extended family, of people living together and raising a child, and the
Yeah.
issue of getting married is clearly not a big deal. I remember, there's this great song with Diana Ross and the Supremes called "Love Child," and it's if you pay attention to the words, it's almost incomprehensible in our current society. But you're right. There are certain sins that are very difficult to undo, and you can't necessarily undo them.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
go ahead.
Diana Ross was excusing that for her people too, that it was okay because this child came forth out of love.
Yeah, but I've always puzzled about that song, because basically what she is saying in the song is, basically, I am not going to have sex with you because I don't want to bring a child into the world without marriage in the same way that I was brought into the world without marriage. So clearly, that song is a song about the shame of bearing a child out of wedlock. And I would say also in Judaism, a child born out of wedlock is not a bastard or a mamzer or anything. It's just a child. There's no untoward legal status associated with such a child. A child born as a result of adultery or incest does have a status as a mamzer. Okay. Next Monday, we will continue this. And Alan and I have been talking about, Alan will take maybe about the second half hour of the program to talk about his recent time. And you were in Israel, I would say over a month, right? You're muted, Alan.
Muted, Alan.
I was in Israel just a little over 7 weeks, just short of.
Yeah, so it was quite a trip, and it was quite a time to be in Israel.
It's always quite a time to be in Israel.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
Alan, I would like to ask you, do you think that they started birthright again or not yet?
Not yet.
Started the what again?
Birthright.
Birthright.
Right.
Not yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of organized
Oh, yeah.
trips to Israel have been interrupted.
Well, the starting point for the answer has to do with airlines. You need to have the non-El Al airlines running more completely because of the range that people come from and to different places, and that is happens slowly. So that's once we got past the period where the airport was closed, then this next question is some has to do with safety, but the practical part. And so as some of us know, some programs in the summer are starting again at Hartman, but everything was canceled. So Birthright is I don't have the answer other than the factors relate to airlines more than anything, and maybe families feeling that it's safe to have the young adults go to Israel.
Yeah, and I was supposed to be in Israel the second and third week of July for a program at Hartman, and that program was canceled.
Right. Mine was also.
Yeah. So I think, there was a appreciation and understanding that people aren't going to come. And, and some of that has to do with airlines. I mean, even when we were planning on coming to airline, when I was making travel arrangements, Hartman was strongly advising us to make our travel arrangements on El Al, because when the other airlines stop flying to Israel, as long as the airport is open, typically El Al is flying to.
That's right, and that's kind of violent, and so.
But also, I mean, the reality is when stuff like this happens, people that have optional trips to Israel quite often cancel them. And so they could continue to run Birthright, but they would probably see an enormous reduction in people willing to go.
And tourism in those programs although Hartman hasn't been impacted by attendance, but I know that in general, since October 7th of 2023, not the Iran issue specifically, tourism and these things have been impacted. But Birthright will not abandon. I'm going to speak without having any facts, Erwin. Birthright will recover and build a program as they always have, even if it's a little smaller for the first couple of sessions. I don't have any doubt that Birthright will continue.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're
And a
welcome.
huge issue now in Israel is also so many adults have been called to active duty that it's difficult to have business as usual, even just because of lack of availability of people. And so many people are still displaced in northern Israel and Gaza. I mean, I'm not up to date on the details, but it's
No,
significant.
it continues, and because of that, you'll see in my report, to give you a teaser, we still are doing volunteer things a lot in agricultural areas because of a shortage of people that we never thought, or I shouldn't, never thought about, but it never affected my many trips to Israel until after 2023.
Yeah, you heard about the MESA program?
The which program?
MESA, MESA program. I receiving emails from them because my granddaughter is a teacher and they would like her to go to Israel to teach English. And but my daughter is concerned that she should go in these conditions. But they are advertising, looking for English
I'm
teachers.
sure they are, and I'm not in. One can look at the various factors that makes one concerned. Just because I'm not concerned doesn't mean it's not. That somebody else would make a different decision about concern. Because the issue we used to think about for Gaza and for Hamas and Hezbollah, it was kind of localized. The rockets only came across the two areas, but since the Houthis, but more importantly the Iranians, there is no place that's less risky than another place. You just have to decide, is the ceasefire going to hold, and also will the anti-ballistic technologies like Iron Dome and the other related ones, and the warnings you get to go into safety, all those things together, two good people can answer different answers, yes and no, to whether they want to go right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll hear a lot more about this next week.
Okay.
Thanks there, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, Rabbi.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good night all, and
Good
we'll see
night.
you
Good
next
night.
Good
next
night,
time.
Michael.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.